Now let's talk about the five senses. So the five senses, right, are sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. So what does it mean when we say senses, right? Why are these considered to be the five senses? So these are the ways that you can observe and gather information from the world around you, right? You can see, you can hear, you can touch, you can smell, you can taste. That brings in information about what kinds of things are in the world around you. So let's suppose you see something, right? So information goes from light goes into your eyes. So, but how does it get to your brain? So it gets to your brain through nerves. So these senses, when they gather information from the outside, how do they send information? How do they send that information to the brain? They have to be connected to the nervous system. They have to be connected through nerves, through these electrical wire type systems to the brain. So let's take a look at some of these in a little bit more detail. All right, so this is a picture of the eye, right? This represents sight, right? So this right over here is the kind of the outside of the eye. You see, this is called the cornea. This is basically like the outside of the eye, right? Now, light from the outside kind of enters the cornea, goes through, which is, the cornea is clear, it goes through this hole called the pupil. Sometimes you'll notice the pupil getting bigger or smaller, and then it goes through the lens, right? So it goes through the lens and it gets focused and it goes all the way to the back. So this center portion over here is also clear. It's filled with a clear gel-like liquid, right? So light from the outside enters through the pupil, gets focused properly through the lens, and it ends up hitting the back of the eye called the retina, right? Now the retina, right, has all kinds of cells, and those cells, they send that information through electrical signals to the brain through what is called the optic nerve. So this retina collects all this light information, right? All the light coming in, it collects that information and sends it to the brain through the nerve called the optic nerve. And that nerve goes into the brain, and then you can sense and see what is going on. Now, what if someone were to cut this optic nerve? Suppose someone has an injury where the optic nerve gets crushed or cut. So the eye can still collect all kinds of information, but it can't send it to the brain, and so you can't see anything. Let's take a look at the skin, right? So this is the sense of touch. So the skin is filled with all different kinds of receptors, right? So for example, we have a receptor here that senses heat or cold. It tells you, whether you've touched something that's hot or cold. You can sense touch, right? Using this thing over here, you can sense pain, and you can sense pressure. So when all of these receptors in the skin gather that information, they send that information through nerves into the brain. Here we have the ear, right? So here we have this ear canal over here, right? So sound, right? Vibrations from the outside enter the ear, and they go through this ear canal, and they hit this thing over here in the back called an eardrum, right? So it's also called this tympanic membrane. So it's basically kind of like the surface of a drum, right? If sound from the outside hits the surface of the drum, it kind of gently vibrates. And so that vibration is connected through a series of bones, and eventually that signal is sent through this nerve to the brain. This right over here is the tongue. On the tongue, there are all different kinds of taste receptors, right? So if we zoom in on some of these, we can see that something that causes taste enters this area here, and it stimulates some of these cells. And what do? They send that signal through these nerves to the brain. This is the sense of smell. So let's suppose this is some kind of cheese or some kind of food, and that odor, the different molecules from this cheese go off into the air. And when you breathe it in through your nose, some of those molecules, they hit these nerves, these receptors at the top of your nose, and that creates electrical signals in the olfactory bulb, and that goes to the brain, and so you can smell something.